Thomas Harding was born in 1843 in Little Rock, Arkansas, to Harrison Harding and Phyllis Harding, some 20 years before the Civil War began. It is believed that he was a slave of John Harding, of the Belle Meade Plantation, located in Davidson County, although there are documents that indicate that Thomas was enslaved at the Sans Souci plantation that was also owned by John Harding. Thomas Harding's obituary tells us that he and the rest of the family moved to Tennessee, 1847, when Thomas was 4 years old. The Sans Souci plantation was owned by the Hardings of the Belle Meade Plantation. It is also believed that Harrison and Thomas Harding were enslaved at the Belle Meade Plantation, just before the Civil War broke out. On June 8, 1861, the state of Tennessee seceded from the Union. Tennessee was the 11th and last state to do so. Tennessee was the last state to side with the rebel Confederate government. Giles Harding, the son of John Harding, who is believed to be the slave owner of Harrison and Thomas Harding, and their families, was a Confederate sympathizer. During the Civil War, many of Tennessee's 275,000 slaves abandoned farms and towns in anticipation of the approach of the Union Army. In the summer of 1862, as the army of General Ulysses S. Grant entered the heavily slaveholding territory of West Tennessee, hordes of hungry and poorly clad fugitive slaves surrounded the Yankees. Grant ordered Chaplain John Eaton to requisition surplus tents, blankets, rations, and tools and establish a camp for the fugitives, who had been supplying forced labor for the Confederate Army as teamsters, construction laborers, and body servants. As property, the former slaves were considered contraband under the Confiscation Act, thus the name contraband camps. Eaton established the first contraband camp at Grand Junction in August 1862. By March 1863, the contrabands at Grand Junction numbered 1,713. 2 years later, contraband camps stretched throughout the occupied parts of the Mississippi Valley. In late 1862, Northern missionaries and church leaders had arrived to establish schools, administer religious and medical services, and even provide political education for contrabands. The Army put the able freedmen to work at 50 cents per day on abandoned farms, government-supervised plantations, and military projects. At that time, Harrison Harding was the reverend at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Nashville, and was pastor to 210 members. I believe that Reverend Harding arrived at the contraband camp, as they were called, after escaping his slave owner. In the spring or summer of 1863, he enlisted for military duty on August 1, 1863. He was assigned to the 12th Regiment Division of the United States Colored Infantry, Company K. I believe that Harrison and Thomas were together when they decided to emancipate themselves from bondage. At some point Harrison had gotten sick and the sickness affected his eyesight. So he was transferred to the 101st. But after his eyesight returned to normal that following August, he was enlisted to the 12th Regiment of the U.S.C.T. However, the 12th Regiment with Harrison Harding, and the 14th Regiment with Thomas Harding, did engage the Confederate Army under the same command, in two of the biggest battles in the Tennessee theater. This is Major General George H. Thomas, the commanding officer of the Union troops in Tennessee. He was one of the top 3 generals in the Union, and many may argue that out of Ulysses S. Grant and General William T. Sherman, Major General Thomas was the best. For he is the only general that never lost a battle in the Civil War. Harrison and Thomas Harding may not have been in the same regiment, but they were in a couple of the same fights, in fact the 2 biggest battles in Tennessee, both of them under the command of Major General George H. Thomas, who was up against one of the Confederates' most decorated and respected generals. General John Bell Hood was a Confederate general during the American Civil War. Hood had a reputation for bravery and aggressiveness that sometimes bordered on recklessness. When Major General Thomas faced off against Hood at the Battle of Nashville, General Thomas created a plan of attack that required the assistance of the 14th Regiment of the U.S.C.T., where Thomas Harding was assigned. General Thomas wanted Hood to believe it was a real attack on his right, hoping that General Hood would move men from his left flank over to strengthen his right flank, and by doing so, General Thomas would bring the full force of military might upon General Hood's left flank. The 14th was under the command of Union Colonel Thomas Jefferson Morgan, born in 1839, was a Union Army officer, Baptist minister, ordained in 1869. He was a government official and public educator, and was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs under President Benjamin Harrison in 1889 to 1893. In retirement, he edited the Baptist Home Mission Society magazine. During the Civil War, he started as a lieutenant in the 17th Indiana Infantry, then was commissioned a lieutenant colonel of the 14th U.S. Colored Infantry, and Colonel Morgan took orders directly from Major General James B. Stedman. and Major General Stedman was given the order to attack Hood's right flank. So, General Stedman ordered Colonel Morgan of the 14th U.S.C.T. to his headquarters. Colonel Morgan writes about this encounter in a book he wrote after the Civil War, entitled Reminiscences of Service with Colored Troops in the Army of the Cumberland, 1863–1865. In it, he writes,
About 9 o'clock at night, December 14, 1864, I was summoned to General Stedman's headquarters. He told me what the plan of battle was, and said he wished me to open the fight by making a vigorous assault upon Hood's right flank. This, he explained, was to a feint, intended to betray Hood into the belief that it was the real attack, and lead him to support his right by weakening his left. Where Thomas intended to assault him in very deed. The general gave me the 14th United States Colored Infantry, under Colonel H.C. Corbin. The 17th United States Colored Infantry, under the gallant Colonel W.R. Shafter. A detachment of the 18th United States Colored Infantry, under Major L.D. Joy. The 44th United States Colored Infantry, under Colonel L. Johnson. A provisional brigade of white troops under Colonel C.H. Grosvenor. And a section of artillery under Captain Osborne, of the 28th Indian Battery. On the first day of battle, as soon as the fog lifted, the battle began in good earnest. Hood mistook my assault for an attack in force upon his right flank, and weakening his left in order to meet it, gave the coveted opportunity to Thomas, who improved it by assailing Hood's left flank, doubling it up, and capturing a large number of prisoners. Thus the first day's fight wore away. It had been for us a severe but glorious day. Over 300 of my command had fallen, but everywhere our army was successful. Victory perched upon our banners. Hood had stubbornly resisted but had been gallantly driven back with severe loss. The left had done its duty. General Stedman congratulated us, saying his only fear had been that we might fight too hard. We had done all he desired, and more. Colored soldiers had fought side by side with white troops. They had mingled together in the charge. They had supported each other. They have assisted each other from the field when wounded, and they lay side by side in death. The survivors rejoiced together over a hard-fought field, won by common valor. All who witnessed their conduct gave them equal praise. The day that we had longed to see had come and gone, and the sun went down upon a record of coolness, bravery, manliness, never to be unmade. A new chapter in the history of liberty had been written. It had been shown that marching under a flag of freedom, animated by a love of liberty, even the slave, becomes a man, and a hero.